historical facts which are stated in such a way that you cannot doubt them. Incorrigibly stated. And this paragraph gives you one very important philosophy, the historical argument. An historical argument has always this one important conclusion. The conclusion can never be conclusive. A historical argument can only give you probable conclusions, which are important. Probable conclusions are not therefore something of lesser value, but that is the utmost that you can derive from historical argument. So you might say that this paragraph says, first of all, that if you examine the whole history of mankind, the most important element in the whole history of mankind is a history of human aspiration. It is the history of the greatest preoccupation which is like a burden, if you are always born with a big bucket on your head, what will you feel? Every one of us is born with a bucket on his head, as it were. And everyone is burdened with that bucket. And everyone is therefore struggling with that bucket. This is what Aurobindo calls the earliest preoccupation. The moment you begin to think, awaken thought, the earliest preoccupation in his awakened thought, the moment you become awakened, you find there is a bucket on your head, there is a big preoccupation. Now Aurobindo argues that preoccupation, it seems to be also the ultimate preoccupation. The starting point of mankind's history, it is such a preoccupation, it seems it is the ultimate preoccupation. It seems, mark the word seems, is probable. It doesn't, it must be. That's a historical argument does not give you conclusive answer. It seems. But even for seeming, there is an argument. Why does it seem to be the ultimate preoccupation? So Aurobindo answers that question. You go through the whole history of mankind. There is one aspiration which can tie up all the facts of history of mankind. One constant preoccupation. Even if you try to banish that aspiration, it comes back again, reasserts itself. There is that aspiration in mankind. There are periods of history when it is thrown out, banished. No more. It comes back again. That aspiration now Aurobindo defines God, light, freedom, bliss, immortality. You might say this is an assertion, but you read the whole history. Aurobindo gives you in brief words that if you read the whole history of mankind, which is a constant effort of man, even when this aspiration is banished, When people have said no more, don't deal with God, don't deal with light, don't deal with immortality, impossible. Again, man comes back to it. Read the history. And the most difficult part of the history is the earliest history of man. Because people think that these great ideas have come only now. But you read the earliest preoccupation you read, where is it available to mankind? The Veda. There is no other text available to mankind than what is given to us in the Veda. It's a historical fact. And if you read the Veda, it is nothing but aspiration for God, light, freedom, immortality. And even today, the most important question for mankind is this very question. Of course, in recent times it has been banished. Think no more of God. Think no more of immortality. And the recent history of 300 years, 400 years is a history of that banishment. As a result of which, where do we stand today? Aurobindo says, mankind is satiated with it. Whatever it has been searching for the last 200-300 years, it is satiated, but not satisfied. It comes back again today. What was the great aspiration in Swami Vivekananda, one of the most contemporary young men of India and the world? His only question was, have you seen God? He was a product of the modern mind. An ardent student of logic. And he wanted only proof of whatever is to be is asserted. His only question is, you speak of God, can you see God? Can you prove God? That was his aspiration. And look around, everywhere where there is today a real questioning. The resounding chorus among all the aspiring minds today is a search for God. Anyway, this particular search, Aurobindo says, he doesn't say conclusively, is bound to be. He says it promises. The logically, historical argument cannot be presented as conclusive. So the first paragraph does not give you any conclusive proposition because it's a historical argument. Historical argument only gives you probabilities. But there is in this very paragraph one ontological argument which is conclusive. Ontological argument is always conclusive. And that argument is also present, although very slightly given, but it is very important. And for philosophy it is very important. You will see here one statement, a very short statement, is also the highest that thought can envisage. This phrase is very important. Is also the highest which the thought can envisage. That which thought can envisage is not historical. Whether in the past or the present or the future, thought is thought. Whatever it can think at the highest is always the highest. whether it was thought at that time or today or tomorrow. The nature of water will remain what water is, always, liquid flow. Therefore, if you make a statement as to what thought can think highest, is conclusive. What highest, what is thought? You take what is thought, it's a fact of thought. What is the nature of thought? And if you analyze the nature of thought as a fact, you will find that the nature of thought is definable in terms of an ontological argument. In the history of thought, ontological argument is quite well known to philosophers. What is an ontological argument? Ontology means reality. That's the meaning of ontology. Study of ultimate reality is ontology. Now, ontological argument is the argument of thought regarding ultimate reality. An argument which is conclusive. So the argument of the nature of thought, starting from the nature of thought, regarding ultimate reality, which is unquestionable, is the ontological argument. The ontological argument simply states very easily, only this much. Thought cannot but think of reality as spaceless and timeless. This is all that the argument says. Thought cannot but, this is the important point, thought cannot but think of ultimate reality as spaceless and timeless. This is all the ontological argument. In the history of Western philosophy, one of the first persons to formulate it was Parmenides. Parmenides, in the Greek thought, he formulated this argument, which is present in Plato, and which became revived in Anselm, another great philosopher, and became refined in Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz. It is even today being questioned. The argument is so powerful that even if people try to doubt it, and many people think they have doubted now successfully, and yet there are people who say, not at all. This argument is irrefutable. You cannot question it. You come right up to Aurobindo and he asserts the ontological argument. And that is stated in this very first paragraph, is also the highest that thought can envisage. What is the highest that you can think of? God, spaceless and timeless reality. And he is also the highest aspiration of man. The highest preoccupation of man is also the highest that his thought can envisage. This is an identity of the two. Man is aspiring for God, is also something that is rationally the most justifying thing. This aspiration of man for God is not irrational. Is the highest that thought can envisage. Now, Sri Aurobindo's crystallization that if you read the whole history of mankind, the one fact which emerges is that there is an aspiration for God, light, freedom, immortality. And it is that aspiration which is philosophically, ontologically, from the highest point of view of thought, is fully justified. This is the starting point of the very, when you go to a temple, you have a big bell and massive bell, and you have first striking of a dong. And if you make a big dong, all the vibrations or reverberations that come out, they go on and on and on and on in your entire movement of the temple, all through your journey. Similarly, this paragraph is a dong of a big bell in the temple of God. This argument that the whole aspiration of man, which you can't rub out at all, whatever you may do, it comes again and again after every banishment, is the aspiration for God. And it is that aspiration which is fully certified by ontological argument, which cannot be questioned by thought at least. Rationally it cannot be questioned. You can question on many other grounds, but rationally you can never question it. So you might say that the very first paragraph of the Life Divine gives before us in a massive manner the quintessence of the aspiration of man. The whole history, the massive history of mankind is summarized in 3-4 terms: God, light, freedom, immortality. And it says that rationally speaking, and this rationally thinking is not only what Sri Aurobindo states here, it is the whole history of thought. If you examine from Parmenides to the present day, if there is one important argument, is ontological argument. You may agree with it, you may not agree with it doesn't matter. But nobody can historically deny the fact that the one greatest philosophical argument that history has manifested in regard to philosophy is the ontological argument. And according to that argument at least, God is the highest that can be envisaged, unquestionably.